The first rays of morning sunlight stretched across the rolling hills as 48-year-old Thomas Walker stepped out of his small farmhouse. The wooden porch creaked beneath his worn boots, and he paused for a moment to admire the quiet beauty of his land. His farm wasn't large, it wasn't famous, and it certainly wasn't making him rich. For over 20 years, Thomas had worked from sunrise until long after sunset, planting crops, repairing fences, feeding livestock, and praying each season would be kinder than the last. But luck never seemed to choose his farm. One year it was drought. The next year it was flooding. Then came pests that destroyed nearly half his harvest. Neighbors often wondered why he refused to give up. Some even laughed. "Sell the land," one man had told him countless times. "You'll never make anything from this place." Thomas always smiled politely. "This land fed my father," he would reply. "And one day, it'll reward patience." Deep inside, though, even he wasn't sure anymore. Bills kept piling up. The tractor needed repairs he couldn't afford. The roof leaked every time it rained. His savings had almost disappeared. Still, every morning he woke before dawn. Every evening he thanked God for another day. Kindness was something he never abandoned, even when life gave him little in return. One chilly autumn afternoon, while repairing a broken fence near the edge of his forest, Thomas heard an unusual sound. It wasn't the cry of a fox, nor the howl of wolves. It sounded like a bird, a very large bird. The desperate screech echoed through the trees. Thomas carefully followed the sound. Branches snapped beneath his boots as he pushed deeper into the woods. The cries grew louder. Then, he saw it. An enormous golden eagle lay trapped beneath fallen branches. One powerful wing hung awkwardly against the ground. Fresh blood stained its feathers. The magnificent bird struggled desperately, its sharp eyes fixed on Thomas. Fear, pain, defiance. Everything could be seen in those golden eyes. Thomas stopped several feet away. Most people would have turned around. A wounded eagle could be dangerous. Its razor-sharp talons were powerful enough to break bone. Its beak could tear flesh. The bird spread its wings and let out another warning cry. Thomas slowly removed his jacket. "It's all right," he whispered softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The eagle didn't believe him. It lunged forward as far as its trapped wing allowed. Thomas remained calm. Slowly, patiently, he used a long tree branch to lift the fallen limbs, pinning the bird. The eagle immediately tried to fly. Instead, it crashed painfully back onto the forest floor. Its wing was badly broken. Thomas sighed. "You won't survive out here." For nearly an hour, he carefully worked around the frightened bird. Using thick leather gloves from his repair kit, he gently wrapped the eagle in his old jacket. The bird fought fiercely. Its talons scratched the fabric. Its powerful wings beat against him. But Thomas refused to let go. When he finally carried the exhausted eagle home, several neighbors happened to pass by. They stared in disbelief. "Have you lost your mind?" one shouted. "That thing will kill you." Another laughed. "You can barely feed yourself, and now you're rescuing wild birds?" Thomas simply smiled. Every life deserves a chance. The neighbors shook their heads and walked away, convinced the struggling farmer had finally gone crazy. Back at the farmhouse, Thomas transformed an old horse stable into a temporary shelter. He cleaned the eagle's wounds. He gently splinted the broken wing, using wooden strips and soft cloth. Every day he brought fresh water, fresh fish, small pieces of meat. For days, the eagle refused to eat. It watched Thomas constantly, suspicious, alert, ready to defend itself. But Thomas never rushed. He never forced trust. Instead, he quietly sat outside the shelter each evening after finishing his farm work. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he simply watched the sunset in silence. Little by little, the eagle stopped attacking whenever he approached. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. As Thomas placed fresh food inside the shelter and turned to leave, the eagle lowered its head, not in fear, not in weakness, but almost in acceptance. Thomas smiled. For the first time in weeks, the magnificent bird began to eat, and although neither of them knew it yet, that simple act of kindness had just begun a journey that would change Thomas's life forever. Winter arrived quietly across the countryside. Snow covered the rolling fields. The trees stood bare against the gray sky. Inside the old stable, the golden eagle grew stronger every single day. Its broken wings slowly healed. Its sharp eyes no longer burned with fear whenever Thomas entered. Instead, they followed him with quiet curiosity. Every morning before feeding his animals, Thomas visited the eagle first. Fresh water, fresh fish, gentle words. That became their daily routine. Weeks turned into months. The eagle eventually allowed Thomas to stand only a few feet away without spreading its wings in warning. It even accepted food directly from his gloved hand. For Thomas, those small moments meant more than words could describe. He had no family left. His wife had passed away years earlier after a long illness. His children had moved to distant cities in search of better lives. Most days, the farm was silent except for the sounds of animals and the wind across the fields. Somehow, the great bird had become his closest companion. Then, one bright spring morning, Thomas knew the time had come. The eagle was ready. He carried the magnificent bird to the top of a grassy hill overlooking the valley. The morning sun painted the countryside in gold. Thomas gently removed the protective cloth from its healing wing. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Thomas smiled softly. "You belong to the sky." The eagle stared at him, then spread its enormous wings. Once, twice. With one powerful leap, it soared into the air. Higher, higher. Circling above the hills, Thomas watched until the bird became nothing more than a tiny silhouette against the clouds. A tear rolled down his cheek. He whispered quietly, "Goodbye, my friend." Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to its familiar routine. Planting, repairing fences, feeding livestock, paying bills he could barely afford. Sometimes, Thomas found himself looking toward the sky, hoping to catch one last glimpse of the eagle. Usually, there was nothing. The neighbors continued mocking his kindness. "Your pet forgot about you," one joked. Another laughed. "All that work for nothing." Thomas simply smiled. You don't help others because you expect something back. One unusually hot afternoon during harvest season, Thomas loaded sacks of grain onto his aging trailer. Dark clouds suddenly rolled across the mountains. Strong winds swept over the fields. A violent storm was approaching much faster than expected. Thomas hurried to secure his equipment. Lightning flashed. Thunder shook the valley. Rain poured down in sheets. As he struggled to close the old barn doors, he heard a familiar sound. A loud, powerful, piercing cry. Thomas looked toward the sky. Far above the storm clouds, a giant eagle circled overhead. It was the same bird, older, stronger, healthier than ever. The eagle flew lower. Again it cried. Not once, not twice, but over and over. It wasn't hunting. It wasn't attacking. It seemed to be calling him. Thomas frowned. What is it? Instead of flying away, the eagle headed toward the northern forest. Then circled back, calling again, waiting. Almost as if it wanted Thomas to follow. Something deep inside him said this wasn't ordinary. Without fully understanding why, Thomas grabbed his raincoat, locked the barn, and began following the eagle into the storm. The rain fell harder as Thomas hurried across muddy fields toward the northern forest. The powerful eagle stayed just ahead of him, never too far, always circling, always calling. Every few moments it landed on a tree branch, looked back at Thomas, then took flight again. It was almost impossible to believe. The bird wasn't wandering, it was leading him. Thomas pulled his raincoat tighter against the cold wind and continued climbing the narrow woodland trail. Lightning flashed across the dark sky. Thunder echoed through the valley. The forest grew thicker with every step. Ancient oak and pine trees blocked much of the fading daylight. The only sounds were the storm, the rustling leaves, and the eagle's unmistakable cry. After nearly an hour of walking, Thomas stopped to catch his breath. "I must be losing my mind," he whispered. But before he could turn back, the eagle swooped low over his head. It landed on a large moss-covered boulder beside a steep hillside. Then it cried again, louder than before. Thomas carefully approached. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just rocks, wet soil, and tangled roots. Then another bolt of lightning illuminated the hillside. Something shimmered beneath the mud. Thomas knelt down. Using a broken tree branch, he brushed away the wet leaves and loose soil. A narrow strip of rusted metal appeared. Curious, he dug a little farther. The metal continued deep into the ground. It wasn't natural. It looked like part of an old iron chest. His heart began to race. Could someone have buried it here decades ago, or had a landslide exposed something long forgotten? Thomas searched the surrounding area. Nearby lay the crumbling remains of an abandoned stone cabin, almost completely hidden by vines and thick undergrowth. It looked as though no one had visited the place for generations. The eagle remained perched above him, watching silently, as if waiting for him to continue. Thomas hurried back to the farm before darkness completely covered the forest. The storm finally began to weaken. That night, he barely slept. The image of the hidden chest replayed in his mind again and again. At sunrise, he packed a shovel, a pickaxe, rope, drinking water, and a small lantern. Then he returned to the same hillside. The eagle appeared once again, circling overhead, almost as though it had been waiting for him. For hours, Thomas dug carefully around the buried object. The deeper he went, the larger it became. Finally, the outline of a heavy iron chest emerged from the earth. Its surface was covered with rust and moss. The lock had nearly disintegrated with age. Thomas took a deep breath. He struck the weakened lock with the pickaxe. Once, twice. On the third blow, the lock snapped open. Slowly, he lifted the heavy lid. Inside were dozens of old leather pouches, bundles of faded documents, silver coins, gold coins, beautiful antique jewelry, and several sealed metal containers wrapped in waterproof cloth. Thomas stared in complete disbelief. "This can't be real!" His hands trembled as he carefully picked up one of the gold coins. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Years of struggling, years of sacrifice, years of choosing kindness over bitterness. And now, hidden beneath a forgotten hillside, lay a discovery that could change his life forever. Thomas looked toward the eagle. The magnificent bird stood proudly on a nearby branch, its golden feathers glowing in the morning sunlight that finally broke through the storm clouds. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Thomas couldn't help but smile. Perhaps saving the eagle had never been about expecting a reward. Perhaps kindness had simply led him to the place where destiny had been waiting all along.